Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Baylor Rice. I am one of the pharmacists and owner here at South River Compounding Pharmacy. So I want to welcome you to our webinar today on inflammation and really how this affects disease and chronic disease. So we've got a lot of information we've got for you this afternoon. Everybody should have received a copy of the slides prior. So that should be in your inbox in a PDF form. And part of the reason why we do that is because I do go through things fairly fast, and some of the things I will cover today, I want to kind of hit the highlights, and then that way you've got additional information that you can refer back to at a later time. I do want to remind everybody you are muted as we are recording this. And then that way, for folks that are watching on YouTube later, we've got good crystal clear audio. So if you have any questions, which we do encourage questions, absolutely happy to answer things for you. Please type those into the chat feature, and we will get those taken care of for you. If you're watching this after the fact and it's YouTube, then certainly send us an email, give us a call, or stop by one of our locations, and we are more than happy to help you and get you going in the right direction. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start today's presentation. Disclaimers I've got for you to read there. Certainly I don't send our slides to the FDA for review prior, nor do most anybody that gives presentations. So a little bit about South River for the new folks that are with us. We are a compounding only pharmacy. We were the first modern day compounding only pharmacy in Virginia. We are accredited by ACHC PCAB. And what also makes us a little bit different is we are specialized in functional medicine, in natural medicine. So we were the first natural pharmacy, medicine pharmacy in Virginia. So we do a lot with vitamins, minerals, herbals, homeopathics. And in today's conversation for inflammation, that is absolutely critical. As we'll go through and talk about the different options, really, certainly avoidance is key. But then once we are exposed to inflammation, then what can we do to help lower it? What can we do to help avoid it? And we'll get into those in just a little bit. So we do a lot with consultations. We do a lot with what we can do to test by a variety of different forms. So we very much are your East meets West, and how do we look at things a little bit different? How do we get more to the root cause of the problem versus putting Band-Aids on a symptom? So with that, we'll get right into it today. So certainly looking at our ancestry versus today, a lot has changed through the years. Certainly before, things that we had to worry about were our predators, our rivals, and certainly pathogens. But certainly in today's world, we do have pathogens, and as we're still in the midst of this COVID nightmare for us all, pathogens, viruses, etc. But also that chronic stress, and especially also with COVID right now, and this Delta variant going through the roof, and our world changing minute by minute, that's further increasing the stress. And not only do we have this chronic stress that's adding to the inflammation, but also certainly our environmental toxins. And there is no way to avoid toxins in the environment today. But what the trick there is decreasing those environmental toxins and limiting our exposure the best we can. Certainly the foods we eat and the choices that we make in every day are going to affect our inflammation, and then downstream kind of that response, if you will, to inflammation to a certain extent. So certainly the infections, the inflammation, the chronic disease, the autoimmune issues that we're seeing, all as our response to these modern day changes that we have today. So certainly an inflammatory response happens, right? We have triggers, we have normal life, this inflammation comes in, and ideally what we want to happen is some sort of response coming in to help try to manage that inflammation, lowering that inflammation. And what happens is when we have that trigger happen, inflammation goes up. If we don't have anything coming in here to help modify and to help resolve it and to take care of it, then we just have chronic inflammation and things going unchecked, if you will. And that's what can lead to certainly immediate issues, but then also long-term disease. And that's what we need to worry about. Certainly uncontrolled chronic inflammation certainly has been linked to many, many diseases. So when we think about this, certainly cardiovascular disease, number one killer for men and women in the US, certainly outside of this COVID time. But certainly our moods, diabetes, obesity, and obesity is kind of one of those things. Even carrying around an extra 5 pounds of fat is adding to the inflammation, right? So we take 5 pounds as serious as 15 and 50 and 150. We need to get that fat mass off. Helping with pancreatitis, asthma, Alzheimer's, dementia, autoimmune, arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, all of these different things. So getting this chronic inflammation in check is certainly going to help with chronic disease. And side note, on most of these also, we do have in our webinar library on YouTube, we have done things on arthritis, gut health, mood, obesity, certainly Alzheimer's, brain function, etc. So if you want to dive further into each one of these and different aspects that we can do to help, certainly go to our YouTube channel and you can watch those. So inflammation, we've got some key enzymes that are responsible for these pathways. So arachidonic acid is helping kind of drive that piece. And then ultimately you've got different enzymes and pathways that are increasing prostaglandins and leukotrienes, which are really this cascade of inflammation within the system. So, what I want you to do, I'm not going to make you an expert in this, and certainly our today, but being aware of some of this verbiage, and as we go through these slides, being aware so you can see we can affect the pathways, and that's the key. And there's certainly some medicines, prescriptive medicines that are out there that can do these, but certainly most medicines have a positive, and most medicines can also likewise have a negative, and that's certainly what we want to keep in mind. And that's probably why most of you are on today, is looking to what are the options that we can have, because the side effects aren't worth the positive from the medication. So I want to talk a second about this pain and inflammatory cycle, right? Because NF-kappa B increases the expression of pro-inflammatory cytokines, but so what happens then is some of the pro-inflammatory cytokines increase the activation of NF-kappa B, and then therefore you have this round and round piece, and it keeps fast forwarding, right? So that ultimately is chronic inflammation. So how do we get off of this wheel that once we get it going, how in the world do we get it to stop, right? So TNF alpha activates that NF-kappa B. And so what you'll see is an increased expression downstream of a variety of enzymes that are pushing this inflammatory process. And so that's what we want to impact. Ultimately, when we think about this from a systems and pathways aspect, is how can we impact the pathways? How can we help to modulate this inflammation, not only initiation, but expression as well? So some of the different tools that we've got in our tool bag, and we'll get more in depth into these as we go along, certainly omega-3 essential fatty acids. Anybody that's seen me with a consultation or heard me speak, I'm a huge advocate of omega-3 essential fatty acids. The data and the research helping everything from head to toe is absolutely astounding. So clean, right? And that certainly quality plays a key role, especially with essential fatty acids, omega-3, if it's not coming from the right part of the sea, if it's not made properly, you're going to have heavy metals, and that's going to cause extra issues. And or some companies will use high heat to drop out. What happens is they'll use high heat, the heavy metals will drop to the bottom, and then they'll decant off the top of it, the omega-3s. But heating it up to 500 kelvins, which is what you need to kind of drop out the heavy metals, you change the chemical moiety, if you will. You change the property of the fish oil. So instead of having a positive impact, for instance, on LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, it'll actually oxidize it and make things worse versus being beneficial. So for those that hear me preach over and over, quality, quality, quality. If you're going to take something, make sure it's proper quality, because otherwise you can end up doing harm instead of good. Tetrahydroiso alpha acids, THIA. That is a hops extract, very specialized hops extract that does an amazing job of helping decrease inflammation. Curcumin, so curcuma root, and many of us will certainly cook with that as well. Xanthocumol is also going to help with decreasing inflammation. Boswellia, as well as ginger. There again, many of you may be familiar with ginger as well with cooking. So using that, adding some additional spice and herb into your food, not only give it a little bit more flavor, give it a little bit more kick, but also helping with the inflammation at the same time. So as we kind of go through and look at the mechanisms of these a little bit individually, this is a THIA, this is the hops extract. So, with some of these things I mentioned earlier, tumor necrosis factor alpha, IL-6, NF-kappa B, helping with COX and PGE2. So again, it's hitting multiple mechanisms, multiple pathways for inflammation. So if you say, well, is there science? Is there data on this? Absolutely there is. A question we get very frequently is, well, Baylor, if it's hops, can I just go and drink some beer? I like my beer. Can I go to the microbrew around the corner and get the same effect? Well, this is a specialized molecule of hops. This is the derivation of it, but they've extracted it and refined it such that this is where we're using it, is that specific molecular form. So that's not going to be present in your typical beers. You're going to have hops, but you're not going to have that specific molecule at the levels that we want, especially to decrease and impact these pathways. So the answer is no, you can't just go drink a keg of beer and get the same effect. Okay. And if you drink a keg of beer at one sitting, that would probably do a little bit of harm and not be the best feeling the next day, shall we say. Some of the different properties that we've seen in studies, certainly reducing swelling, helping with arthritis, joint damage, cartilage degradation, bone erosion, reducing IL-6 levels, which are all fantastic, helping with that joint discomfort. UC2 is undenatured collagen, so it's a type 2 collagen protein matrix. So we can incorporate that in with THIA. We've got that in a formula that we call joint complex. So not only do we have the THIA hitting inflammation, but we've got the type 2 collagen protein helping with that cartilage piece. So for folks that are having inflammation, having more joint inflammation, then that combination works really well. So kind of our osteoarthritis, if you will. Curcumins, so they are an isolated constituent, the curcuminoids of curcumin. It's the primary active constituent in the turmeric root, so the curcuma longa. So certainly, again, we've used that with cooking for many, many, many years. Again, properties analgesic, anti-arthritic, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant. So lots of data that goes back through the years with using curcumin. I like it. Certainly, we can use specialized forms of curcumin. So as science progresses, is what we're using, there with cooking the same as what we could potentially put into a supplement? And the answer is no. Milligram to milligram, it's certainly not the same, especially when we get into CGM, curcuma, oligomenocydes. So that is combining the curcumin with a specific fiber from a fenugreek seed that's going to help increase the absorption and the bioavailability of that curcumin. So in essence, we're able to use a lot less milligrams of the curcumin to get that into the system, to really get it to the target of where we want. So if you kind of look at that and compare it, for instance, this is your standard curcumin extract versus a CGM extract. So you can see the absorption is much higher, okay, as compared to normal curcumin. So definitely there's ways that we can do to optimize the absorption of nutrients and supplements. So xanthahumol is one of the many active also constituents in the hops as well. So again, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant. So it's another piece out of that, helping with the inflammatory process. Again, depending how it's extracted, depending how it's done, is going to affect absorption. So that's where we spend a lot of our time in working with our suppliers on making sure we use the best possible products and ingredients to get the best outcomes ultimately, right? Boswellia, also known as Indian frankincense. It's a gum resin from the Boswellia serrata tree. Does have a few active constituents in it. Certainly the beta boswellic acid, alpha boswellic acids, essential oils, flavonoids. Quercetin is one of those flavonoids that you can be found there. Again, inflammation, as well as helping with antioxidant properties. Ginger root, again, inflammation, antioxidants. Yes, cook with it, use it, but then we can also use some additional to help kind of drive those. So this was a picture we had earlier for you to kind of look at the arachidonic acid process and how this kind of goes down, the mechanisms with the enzymes affecting inflammation. And so what I wanted to do is kind of illuminate for you, this is where curcumin and ginger is hitting, is at that PLA2, curcumin, boswellic, and ginger is hitting at the LOX, 5-LOX pathway. Curcumin, the hops extracts, ginger and boswellia hitting at the cyclooxygenase 1 and 2, so your COX-1, your COX-2 inhibitors. And there are some different drugs that you may be familiar with. Celebrex, for instance, hitting at that COX-2, right? Well, guess what? We can hit at that same pathway using natural agents, but without the GI or cardiovascular side effects that we can see from those historical COX-2 drugs. Something else that we can use to helping inflammation, pro-resolving modulators. This is something that's hitting it really kind of more further upstream. They are a group of lipid mediators that kind of drive the resolution of inflammation. They can be produced endogenously in the body from precursor polyunsaturated fatty acids, arachidonic acid, EPA, DHA. They are required for inflammation resolution. So, and to kind of return to that baseline. So there's a number of different areas of where that hits. So SPMs are actually critical in helping downstream with the inflammation in the process. So it's a conversion of the parent fatty acid to the SPMs, may not always be optimal. So, we have alpha linoleic acid, but that has to be converted, and you acquire that certainly through the diet. We have cell membrane integrity and the EPA and DHA helping, but the EPA and DHA endogenously, we need to convert that over into SPMs. But as I said earlier, with diet and our exposure to toxins, pesticides, bacteria, viral, etc., sometimes we'll have that issue with converting over into our endogenous SPMs. So SPMs do have a derivation of coming from the fish oil, but I want to make sure people understand using and taking SPMs does not replace the chemical properties of why you would still want to take fish oil and all the positive benefits from that. So we are kind of hitting different areas. And that's where the SPMs kind of hit is at that trigger spot, kind of helping to resolve that modulation here versus just trying to hit it and take down inflammation. So it is hitting a little bit differently than the curcumin, the Boswellia, the hops extracts, etc. So what they really kind of do is really enhancing that macrophage phagocytosis and efferocytosis, which clears up the dead and dying cells and the cellular debris, shortens the time to resolution, right? So we don't want this chronic inflammation going. We want that to resolve and comes down, helping with increasing the production of anti-inflammatory mediators, and of course, enhancing tissue regeneration. Some of the different data and studies that are out there, and for our autoimmune patients, you may say, well, is it affecting and suppressing immune function? And the answer is no. So a lot of the mouse models, etc. So you can see this is hitting a lot of different areas. So helping with Candida albicans, helping with sepsis, E. coli, herpes virus, staph, etc. So helping with both mortality as well as survival overall and decreasing that inflammation. So it's helping to resolve that inflammatory issue and helping with the response. So some conditions that we can think about as far as with what's affecting our endogenous decrease of SPMs in Homo sapiens, and that's going to be certainly Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular, all of these things that we went over earlier, right? Of what we use it for, you can kind of flip that and say, well, this is where we find lower levels of SPM. So that's kind of why in research they're looking at, well, if we're finding these diseases, people have lower SPMs and you increase SPMs, then it's helping with disease. Well, yes, and why? It's helping with that inflammatory process and helping to resolve inflammation much faster. Pain, and you can see decrease after 4 weeks versus baseline by about 46%, decreasing it by 8 weeks to about 50%. So yes, for folks in pain, folks that are having an inflammatory, painful issue. So again, some areas that you can think about where it may be useful: cognitive issues, autoimmune, cancer, anything inflammation, right? Dermatitis, post-surgical, with recovery, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, mitochondrial dysfunction, GI problems, inflammatory bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis, endometriosis, list goes on. So to kind of bring those things together we've gone over a lot of different ingredients. So where do we have these things kind of combined that would be beneficial, and what can I do to take? So Inflavonoid Plus is a supplement that's going to have the GCM, or rather CGM, curcumin in it, going to have the hops extract, ginger and boswellia all in one capsule. Works extremely well. Generally, we'll do anywhere from 1 to 2 capsules up to 3 times a day, depending where you are in the phase of inflammation and did you have a recent injury, etc. Ultra Inflamex 360. This is a fantastic, it's a medical food, otherwise known kind of protein shake, right? Very fancy protein shake. So you've got micronutrients, macronutrients, and it's loaded with anti-inflammatory agents in it. So especially for my RA folks, my patients with chronic inflammation, typically what we'll do is get you on 2 scoops twice a day for a good 30 to 60 days and then kind of reevaluate. While we're doing that, certainly we'll make modified elimination diet changes at the same time will pull certain inflammatory foods out of the diet. I'll talk more about that in a moment, to try to help knock down inflammation. Certainly with either one of those, we'll add in some fish oil. Now, whether we do that with a soft gel or Baylor, I have a hard time swallowing a big capsule, then certainly the liquid is another option for you. As I mentioned earlier, if you have more kind of the osteoarthritis, if you've got more of that joint inflammation, decreased cartilage, decreased flexibility, etc., then pulling in that hops extract with the type 2 collagen protein. So that's kind of hitting it both ways from an inflammatory perspective as well as a cartilage aspect. The SPMs, so the specialized protein-resolving mediators, that's really the SPM active, is what those are. Other options for kind of chronic disease. So now this is compounded. So we do make this in the lab, low dose naltrexone, LDN. So it does require prescription. But I did want to take a few minutes talking about this because this has been a great thing to have in the arsenal for you. So the LDN hits at a variety of these different pathways, as we spoke about with the other natural anti-inflammatories and SPMs hitting it. There again, the LDN is also hitting a number of different pathways as well. And now Trekzone, certainly it is available commercially at high dose, but what we're doing is by doing it at low dose, instead of being an antagonist at the receptor level, it's actually an agonist. So it helps stimulate that INF as well as interleukin-2 production, so helping to decrease inflammation and clear that inflammation. A variety of different uses. Certainly in short, if you've got an autoimmune disease, I use LDN, okay? Autoimmune, think LDN. Chronic inflammation, also think LDN as far as being an arsenal. So from Crohn's, MS, fibromyalgia, Lyme, and autoimmune, there's about 100 different 5 autoimmune diseases. So I certainly won't go through and list all those this afternoon. But no, if you've got a diagnosed autoimmune disease, we need to think about LDN to help you with that. How do we typically use it? Typically, we'll start with 1.5 milligram capsules and we'll titrate up, go to 1.5 for a week, go to 3 milligrams for a week, and then go to 4.5. Typically, we'll dose it at bedtime. So it's hitting not only the immune piece, but it's also hitting inflammation. CBD. We can't talk about inflammation these days without bringing in CBD into the discussion. Pardon me. CBD does make quite a difference on that aspect, and we'll kind of go over a little bit of the information on that. Now, certainly we do have a webinar, so if this kind of teases you a little bit and such that, okay, I want to dive further into that, we have spent an hour just on this. So why does CBD, why do we see such a wide variety of disease states helped with it? Well, it's responsible for homeostasis in a variety of different systems. It's over 200 different systems in the body. And we have CB1 and CB2 receptors really head to toe, so all throughout the body. And we have endogenous cannabinoids in us, and those are 2-AG as well as anandamide. So really, and Raphael Michelem is one of the chemists who identified the endocannabinoid system. We have this system in us. He's made statements, I can't list all the physiological systems and conditions affected by cannabinoids because there are too many, which is pretty amazing. World Health Organization has made comments on cannabinoids. CBD is safe and well tolerated in humans, not associated with any negative public health effects, and not associated with abuse potential. So for those that think CBD, yes, it does come from the cannabis plant. The cannabis plant, you can either have marijuana, or you can have hemp plant. So the hemp is a sister to the marijuana plant. However, from the hemp plant, it's very low in THC. So, and we can do CBD either totally THC free, or we can do it with just a little teeny tiny bit. Legally, you're allowed to go up to less than 0.3%. Certainly, that's not enough to get you high or stoned or have any negative impacts from that aspect. So we can do it either way. The entourage effect, so CBD, so you may be thinking, well, why in the world, Baylor, you mentioned the systems, you mentioned the receptors head to toe, but to kind of break this out, to let you know there are about 105 different cannabinoids in the system. And so some of the main cannabinoids that we have here, they're again, anti-inflammatory, proliferative, right? Neuroprotective, anti-proliferative, so analgesic, anti-inflammatory, right? So a variety of these cannabinoids, not just a singular cannabinoid, but have anti-inflammatory properties and hitting all sorts of different pathways within the system. So that's really postulated why we see such huge impact on CBD. The trick with CBD is typically we'll start low and go slow and increase it up until we have the desired effect. Or if as we're increasing that up, you get daytime sleepiness, then we decrease the dosage. Okay. Tinctures, I use a lot of tinctures. I like tinctures, works very well. Some people, Bill, I don't want to deal with the liquid. Just, give me something I can swallow or give me a gummy. It really doesn't matter to me how you do it. It's being consistent and it's escalating the dosage up. Certainly, we can also do it topically. I mean, if you've got inflammation, let's say you overdid it playing tennis or whatever, working in the yard, have some shoulder pain, can you take it orally as well as apply it topically? Yes, we've got creams and salves that we can apply it right at the site of action. If it's good for me, is it good for my puppy or my kitty cat? Absolutely. We do have pet tinctures and pet treats. So both from inflammatory issue, GI issues, separation, anxiety, mood, etc. So dogs and cats, we use it for a lot with anxiety, being wound up, separation, thunderstorms, that sort of thing. As I mentioned, quality is a big issue, so we want to make sure we're dealing with proper quality, both not only with supplements, but also CBD as well. Make sure we know what we're doing. And so we're doing that research and data digging for you so you don't have to worry about that piece. What are some baseline things that we can do? Well, there's like building a house. We want to make sure we have a solid foundation with the house before we put the roof and the skylights in, right? So having a good therapeutic multivitamin on board. Our Phytonutrient Multi is a food-based multi with methylated Bs. So methylation, half the population has what's called an MTHFR deficiency. So that is a genetic SNP to where you're not converting that folic acid and B12 over. So I just put everybody on methylated Bs. With MTHFR deficiency, we see an increase in cardiovascular as well as neurological disease. So let's go ahead and cover our bets there. So very rich in antioxidants. It's aimed at helping to protect our cellular DNA. Omega-3 essential fatty acids, as I mentioned earlier, either the soft gels, which each soft gel is given 1,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA per capsule. So typically I want you on at least 2,000 to 4,000. I'll go even higher than that milligrams per day. And then the liquid fish oil is 2,400 milligrams of EPA and DHA per teaspoon. So anywhere from 1 to 2 teaspoons a day typically is where we'll go with that. Vitamin D3, it's imperative for immune, inflammation, bones. Most Americans are going to be deficient in vitamin D. Okay, look at the data also on vitamin D in COVID. Vitamin D is going to help with exposure, and then if you are exposed, it's going to help decrease symptomatology afterwards. The data is very good and clear on that piece. So typically, if I don't have a lab, I'm going to bring in 5,000 IUs a day. I will go higher if I do have a lab on that. We'll go up to 10,000, et cetera, per day. but typically we'll start with 5,000 IUs. Plus, I like pulling in some K2. K2 is going to help with getting the D absorbed. It's also going to help drive the calcium into the bones and helping calcium stay away from the smooth muscle, so the arteries, right? So helping against plaque formation and that sort of thing. As I mentioned already, CBD, generally, I'll start with 15 milligrams and titrate that up. Most of my patients are probably somewhere around 25 to 30 milligrams a day. To spec that out further, 20 to 60. We will go higher. I've got some patients as high as 100 milligrams a day. Those are typically more my chronic pain patients. They've had some sort of injury. They've had an assault to the system, and we're trying to knock that down. Once you saturate the endocannabinoid system and really kind of saturate it for a couple of months, generally I find then we can start tapering the dosage down some. And there again, I taper it down slowly like we did with increasing it up. So some other things that we can do, certainly this is baseline. What should I be taking? As a healthy person. Baylor, I'm healthy. I'm 35, 45 years old, 65, whatever the case may be. I'm healthy. Nothing really wrong. What do I need to do for baseline so I can help keep my bar elevated and help protect from long-term disease? This is baseline. Then we get into, well, what else can I do? Baylor, I've got some pain. I've got some inflammation. I've got something going on. Well, 75% of Americans are deficient in magnesium. Patients in pain. So typically, if you have inflammation is going to spill over with pain. So that's why I'm bringing in a discussion real quick here on magnesium. So patients in pain, that number goes to 95% of patients in pain are deficient in magnesium. So magnesium is responsible for over 300 pathways in the system. So it's absolutely critical. So whether we do that as a capsule or whether we do it as a powder, my favorite form of magnesium is a glycinate form. It is much better absorbed. It's least offensive to the gut, less likely to cause a osmotic effect on the bowels, which can then cause like a watery stool and that sort of thing. So whether you do the capsules or do the powder, it doesn't matter. If you've got fibromyalgia, if you've got those tender points, right? Well, our fibro support is a magnesium glycinate, plus we've got some malic acid in there. So malic acid helps break down those tender points, okay? So adding magnesium, the best time to do it is bedtime. Why? It helps to relax smooth muscle. So it helps with sleep. Joint health. I didn't go over all of this here, but I've got this here because most people are aware of glucosamine sulfate. Tried and true. I kind of call that level 1, right? So start having some issues. Glucosamine sulfate by itself, generally 1,500 milligrams will do the trick. If you've got a little bit more damage to the joints and or increased pain, inflammation, then maybe we add in some chondroitin and some MSM. If it's even further behind that, I'm having daily pain, then adding in some green lipid muscle extract, some hyaluronic acid. Take that a step further, or there again, if we've got inflammation, as I mentioned earlier, the joint complex has a type 2 collagen protein that does an amazing job for the joints, but also has that hops extract hitting into inflammation. Typically, these guys here, give it a good solid 90 days to really start seeing a difference. Joint complex, most of my patients in about 30 days are going to start seeing a difference. So that is going to work a little bit faster than those top 3. Okay. And then as we went through these other things, right, Ultra Inflammex, that's the medical food that does an amazing job for inflammation. So if you've really got some deep-seated inflammation, if you also have some gut things going on, that is going to help support the detoxification pathways. It is going to have some things to help support immune, and it is going to help with some gut healing at the same time too. So generally, we'll do 2 scoops twice a day. And flavonoid plus is the curcumin hops boswellia ginger capsule combination. So again, that anywhere 1 to 2 capsules 2 times a day. If I've got somebody with, Baylor, I just fell off I was mountain biking and I fell off my bike and, hit my shoulder, hit my leg, or, whatever type of injury, I will go up to 3 times a day on that as well. And then as you're getting better, kind of decrease the dosage, right? And, you know, think about that, kind of like a natural NSAID, so to speak. So your Advils, your Motrins, your ibuprofens, naproxens, meloxicams, etc. Those drugs do a nice job of decreasing inflammation, certainly, but what they can also do, what's the negative piece for those drugs? They can eat a hole in the gut. They also get caught up with the prostaglandin synthesis, so they can further eat away at the cartilage. So somebody taking NSAIDs over a long period of time, yes, it's decreasing inflammation, but it's further progressing the disease, especially for osteoarthritis. Plus, it can eat a hole in your gut, have a negative impact on the immune system, and then also certainly can be tough on the kidneys. So, as I mentioned early on, your prescriptive drugs, even your over-the-counter NSAIDs, yes, they can have a positive, but can have some very nasty effects to them as well. So if we can get the positive without the negative, that's generally where I like to go. The SPM actives, so the pro-resolving mediators, to helping really at the original site for helping decrease inflammation. So again, can we add that on top of either one of those guys? Absolutely. We already spoke about CBD in kind of baseline, but if you also, hey, well, what about adding something topically to site of action? Absolutely. I don't travel without it. I keep kind of, there's a salve. The sports stick is kind of the salve and a stick and an easy to go kind of twisty thing that you can just rub it right on. Works fantastic. So diet. What can we do? We talked about supplements. I kind of mentioned diet earlier, but to kind of dive into this just a little bit more, real whole foods, unprocessed. So we really want to shop that perimeter of the grocery store. We want to try to avoid the processed, especially the ultra processed, as those really suppress immune function. Affecting immune function, then certainly we're increasing inflammation. The sugar feeds inflammation, right? Sugar is also suppressing the immune system, affects the viral, same with starches. Limiting or stopping the alcohol. Again, that's turning into sugar, which is increasing inflammation and affecting immune function. So I get the aspect of, alcohol helping to kind of, oh, well, it's helping to relax me at the end of the day. I get that. I understand that. However, it's also affecting delta wave sleep. So it's affecting your sleep, which is impairing the adrenals to be able to reset, which the adrenals are processing the stress and the anxiety. And so the more we're torquing our adrenals, the more we're affecting that chronic inflammation, right? So we go back on that merry-go-round, right? Around and around we go. Where it stops, nobody knows. So we want to stop that process. We want to stop that round and round. So, occasional alcohol use, absolutely. If you're leaning on that every night, all right, we need to decrease that. So overall lifestyle, more fruits and veggies. Careful not to overdo it with fruits, though. Generally, 1 to 2 servings a day. Maybe if you're really high athletics, maybe 3 servings a day. But fruits are a natural sugar, so we don't want to go too hard on those. Good fat, olive oil, right? Avocados, bringing in the good fats into the system. Lots of fiber. For those of us that are, 45, 50 and above, a good 30 plus grams of fiber a day. Most people aren't getting anywhere near that. Fiber is also helping to bind with the toxins, getting the toxins out of the system. Avoiding salt, caffeine, excessive alcohol. So trying to limit, right? Ideally avoid, but at least in limiting that. Trying to limit avoiding the white flour, the white sugar. Exercise, bringing in that cardio. Ideally, I want the heart rate elevated 300 minutes a week. Now, if you've had a recent injury or if it's, Baylor, I'm just so sick, I can't do that. Work up to that. I at least want you moving. Let's get moving. Let's get going. Trying to pull in some weight bearing, making sure we've got some daily stretching on board. As we get older and as we get more inflamed and we get tighter and tighter, so we need to stay loose. Staying loose is certainly going to help with that whole inflammatory process as well. As I mentioned a little bit ago with regards to sleep, we need 8 hours, and most people laugh when I say straight sleep each night. That's what's going to allow us to get into delta wave sleep, get our restorative sleep, reset the adrenals, right? So we can be able to take on the next day. Relaxing, breathing deep, doing it often, having 20 minutes of kind of downtime for you every day. Absolutely. Before I get into that, so some other things I mentioned a little bit: anti-inflammatory diet. So if you're looking at doing, well, Baylor, I've got some pretty deep-seated inflammation. I want to, really go after the ultra-inflammax, hit inflammation pretty hard for a good 30 to 60 days, kind of reevaluate. Typically, some of the things that we're pulling out of the diet, and we can get you a copy of this, come in the store, let us know. Typically, I'm going to hit the highlights for you real quick. Okay. So dairy, we want to pull dairy out. Okay. So where does that leave us? That leaves us almond milk, rice milk, coconut milk. There are other dairy alternatives. So let's pull dairy out. Red meat, right? So the beef, pork, mystery meats, we want to pull that out. And I'm not saying indefinitely, I'm saying while we're trying to knock down inflammation, and then we kind of pull these things back in. Corn, peanuts, peanut butter. Okay. There are other nut butters, so almond butter, cashew butter, right? Soy, want to pull soy out of the diet. Gluten. Gluten is a big one. So that's, wheat falls under that category. There are gluten-free grains we can use, but gluten tends, especially if you have an autoimmune disease, you have to get rid of gluten. It is going to further keep the inflammatory markers elevated. Okay. Orange juice, oranges, nightshades. Okay. So your peppers, sugar, we mentioned, right? Those are some of the highlights. And I've already mentioned increasing the fats, right? Good fats. So getting rid of hydrogenated fats. Water, lots of water. Take your weight and divide it by 2 in pounds. That's how many ounces a day. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you need 75 ounces of water a day. If you're 200, 100 ounces of water a day. If you're 100 pounds, then 50 ounces a day. Now, we're in summertime. We're in the dog days of summer in August right now, especially for those of us that are here in Virginia. We've been fortunate the last few days that the humidity's been lower. However, I'm expecting that to be torqued back up any day. So if you're out there cutting your grass, 95 degrees, 95% humidity, you're sweating, you're, like a champ, you may need a little bit more water those days, right? We may also need to bring in some extra amino acids. We may need to bring in some extra electrolytes to help kind of counterbalance. On those days, side note, there is an energy drink we've got called Endura that does an amazing job of helping to balance those electrolytes. And helping with rehydration. I use it for moms and dads, everyday folks doing, just out in the garden or yard work, as well as I use it for my professional athletes and collegiate athletes as well. So it is clean on that side. Okay. So if you've got somebody in Division I or you've got a professional athlete that's worried about testing, that is clean. I've used it for all of those different athletes. So our webinar special today, we do have some short dated 450 milligram Boxley's Organic tinctures. The lemon and the sweet mint is what's on special. So buy one, get one free on those flavors while supplies last on that. That is a THC free. Okay, so no THC in those. It is broad spectrum, 5 different minor cannabinoids with 20 different terpenes, so very rich in terpenes, has a lot of parts and pieces of that hemp plant in it. Our full spectrum CBD, that's buy one, get one free as well, or we've got buy 2, get 3 free. And so we've got some specials. You can order it online, you can stop in the store, and we can take care of you there, okay? So questions, type in the chat box. Go ahead and put your questions in there, and we'll be sure to get to those. So while you're putting those in, I'll kind of synopsis things up a little bit. So how do I get started? Where do I go from here? Certainly, if you've got an autoimmune disease, chronic disease, then certainly you could engage your practitioner, primary care, endocrinologist, rheumatologist, whoever is really kind of following, managing that chronic pain, inflammation for you. Talk to them about the LDN. Eric will be emailing out when the webinar link is ready and the recording is done. He'll email you a link to that, and he's also going to include a copy of a handout on LDN that you could share with your practitioner. It does have on there a sample of how to write the prescription to keep it simple. I like easy. Life's tough enough, so whatever we can do to make your life easier, let us help you. Okay, you've got a copy of the slides. You've got lots of information. I know you're kind of going through and digesting it. I've gone over a lot of information really pretty fast this afternoon. If it's, okay, wow, I need help. I've got a lot of chronic inflammation. It's more than just, inflammation here and there. Then, get your labs together, email or call, ask for Allison. She's our patient care coordinator. She can get you scheduled for a consult. You can meet with me, you can meet with Rhonda. Rhonda's worked with me for 17 years now, so she's one of our nutritional consultants, wealth of information, so she can also help you with diet, how to really do that anti-inflammatory diet, if you will, what other supplements to pull in. If you're not local, certainly we ship. That's easy. You can go onto our online store and order, or give us a call, or pop us an email. We're all about keeping it simple. We still do offer curbside pickup. The stores are open, so you can come into the store, or give us a call and we can ship it to you, or we can bring it out to your car, whatever's easy. Okay. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us on the various social media platforms. If you would take some time, I've taken some time this afternoon. We offer these webinars for free. Take us a time and subscribe. Give us a review. We'd love to hear from you. If you haven't already signed up for our email newsletter, we do not sell, nor have I ever, or will I sell that information out there for you. So questions. You can use your chat box to put anything in there for us this afternoon. And certainly if something comes up later, you've got all of our coordinates, phone number. You can send an email either to Allison or info@, and somebody will get back to you. And I guess, while I'm waiting for anybody else to put in, how else can you get started? Start with the baseline supplements, right? That's a couple slides back. That's a start. Start with making some diet modifications. Start with, let me pull in some exercise. Let me pull in some stretching. Let's work on the sleep. Let's work on getting the stress under control. You want to learn more on stress, again, go to our YouTube channel, and we do have a stress adrenal webinar on there. We've got CBD webinar. We've got one on osteoarthritis and joints. I think that was a couple back. So we've got a nice library on there. that you can go and get some additional information and dive into a variety of these topics deeper. If you don't see something on the YouTube channel that you think we've done before, send us an email. Some of those we kind of have hid behind the scenes, but we can send you the link to it. So guys, I'm not seeing any questions coming in. Give it just a little bit longer while we're waiting. Certainly, I want to thank you all for your attention this afternoon. I'm glad you joined us. For those that are watching afterwards and watching on YouTube, certainly also for you, if you have any questions there, again, send us an email, give us a call, stop in the store. We've got a very educated staff. We want to help you. We want to help you achieve optimal health, and really getting that bar elevated and helping you get to where you need to be and where you want to be. All right, guys, I don't see anything else coming in other than some waves and some thank you. So thank you, guys. So glad you enjoyed it. And until next time, have a great afternoon. Thank you.